Welcome to the Valley Politics History Interviews. I'm Terry Christensen. Larry Jinks was editor and later publisher of the San Jose Mercury News when it transitioned from being a propaganda tool of San Jose's old guard to modern mainstream journalism, and when San Jose was going through political turmoil, including the firing of a city manager and the campaign for council elections by district. The newly professional Mercury News that Jinks built played a key part in the outcome of these and other major political battles of the day. We aired our interview with Larry Jinks in two parts in 2017. Now, here it is in full. Well, thanks for welcoming us. You came to San Jose in 1977.
That's correct.
What brought you here?
Well, I had been, for about 16 years, I had been on the Miami Herald, and the last 4 years of that I was the executive editor, which meant I was in charge of the news operations of the Herald. Didn't have anything to do with the opinion pages. And I had let it be known, not very forcefully, that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in Miami for a whole set of reasons. But I thought I would be there probably for a good bit longer, and then one day I was called in and asked if I would like to come out and talk to a guy named Tony Ritter in San Jose, who was being groomed to be the next publisher of the San Jose paper.
Actually, it was the San Jose papers then, right?
Yeah,
Morning Mercury,
it was the Merc and the News.
Morning Mercury and Evening News. So there actually were two papers.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they were administered as one unit. And I thought it would be interesting to try. I came out with Claire, my wife, and spent a couple of days. She was mostly, Tony had somebody showing her around homes, and I spent most of the time with him. At that precise point, Tony was not yet publisher. His uncle Joe Ritter was the publisher, but it was clear that he was destined to be. And so I went home that first night and said, well, you know, this is kind of interesting. And she said, we can't afford to live here.
People are still saying that.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Knight and Ritter had, Miami Herald was a night newspaper owned by the Knight family when I joined the company first in Charlotte in 1956. And the Ritters, of course, were the Ritter Publications, was basically owned by the Ritters. They both had gone public in the late 60s when a lot of newspaper companies were going public, selling stock, etc. And in 1974 or 5, they merged, and
the Knight papers and the Ritter papers.
And became Knight Ritter. And originally there was more Knight than Ritter in the merger, and the headquarters were in Miami, and the people in charge were the people who had been in charge of Knight newspapers. And that's where I had spent so much of my career. I made several visits to San Jose while Bo was still in high school. And then April 1st, I came out and became the 1977 and became the editor of the Mercury and News, which was the Mercury News on Saturday and Sunday. And
so you were the editor. Tony Ritter.
Tony had become publisher.
Became the publisher
in the interim.
What's the difference between an editor and a publisher?
Well, an editor is responsible usually for the editorial part of the paper, meaning news and frequently comment. Although on a lot of papers and at times on the Mercury, the there's been a distinction between the two. They would both answer to the editor, and the editorial page editor would both answer to the publisher. But I was responsible for both when I came out.
News and editorial.
News,
so that's
and
the opinion section.
News and the opinion section, which was interesting because I had not had much experience in the opinion part of the business. I considered myself a news executive, and that's where I focused primarily when I first came to San Jose.
What's the publisher do then? The publisher
is the head of the whole operation. He's got the business responsibilities, but also in most instances, including here, he's responsible for what happens editorially also.
And you were the editor when you arrived. Later, you served as publisher of the Mercury News.
Yeah,
as well.
in the interim, I went back to Miami for 8 years and was a corporate officer for 8 years. I was ultimately a senior vice president for news of the company.
For Knight Ridder.
For Knight Ridder.
All the papers.
For all the papers. And one of my predecessors in that role said his job was to explain the editors to the corporation, to explain the corporation to the editors. That's an oversimplification, of course.
Well, let's go back to your time as editor.
Right.
So you arrive in San Jose in 1977. What were your impressions of San Jose politics at that time? And especially compared to what Miami was like. You'd spent over a decade in Miami.
Yeah, I'd spent 16 years in Miami, and Miami had changed dramatically in that time because of the heavy influx of Cuban exiles in that time, and their politics had become very influenced by the Cuban immigration. It took me, I didn't try to make an immediate, draw immediate conclusions about the political situation in San Jose. I met Janet Gray Hayes, who was the mayor, right away. I met some of the members of the Board of Supervisors. A lot of what we were doing at the paper had to do with what they did.
Mm-hmm.
My original sense of San Jose was that it was a big city that looked like a small town, and in some ways acted like a small town.
Yeah. Even then, the population was about 600,000.
That's correct. Yeah, right around 600,000. A man named Ted Tedesco was city manager, whom I liked. I think was trying to do a good job, and I got to know him. I spent a lot of time in the beginning focusing on the coverage of local government and local politics, but especially local government. I believed then, and I believe now, that a major responsibility of a journalistic institution is to do a good watchdog job, where it's of whoever feels the responsibility for it.
So what did you do to change the way the Mercury News was covering local politics or editorializing about it?
Well, I don't want to be unfair to Joe Ridder, but he had been a really serious power broker who made personal decisions about what he was going to put in the paper, etc. I understood before I got here that I was not going to have to operate that way. And I certainly didn't with Tony Ridder, who made no effort to operate that way. We were good partners, and he was very supportive of what I was trying to do. First of all, a lot more money was made available to us. Knight Ridder felt, and certainly Tony felt, that the potential of the paper had not been realized by any means. And we were able to add people fairly quickly. As a matter of fact, I think I was maybe adding them too slowly for Tony's taste.
Really?
Tony's a man who likes to do things in a hurry if he's going to do them. And I wanted to be very careful in the process of selecting people for the paper and building staff. And a lot of that was with young people, but with very carefully selected young people.
Al Garza and 3 other council members formed what was called in your newspaper and elsewhere the Gang of Four to overthrow
the fearsome foursome,
to overthrow the controlled growth majority and the city manager, Ted Tedesco, who were trying to manage growth more cautiously in San Jose. So these 4 guys decided to fire the city manager and push a big road expenditure plan and accelerate growth again. And the newspaper opposed them and wrote a lot of stories about it, very critical stories. And ultimately, 2 of them running for election in November were defeated.
Right.
Some people say because of your newspaper.
Well, I think I said earlier that I think a newspaper has certainly located in a community has a responsibility to do an aggressive job of sort of monitoring what happens in local government. That can be done responsibly or not responsibly. But that, as you say, the Gang of Four, fearsome foursome, were very aggressive in what they were trying to do. And I and others at the paper thought that required really close attention from us and aggressive news coverage, which we did, and editorial page coverage.
Yes.
As you remember, I'm sure, along the way, I had brought in a guy who had worked for me in Miami named Rob Elder, who first was a reporter, and I think he used you and your colleagues as sources early on to learn about what was happening politically in this community. And when we were ready to name somebody to be the editorial page editor, I chose Rob for that job. And Tony Ritter kept him after I left, and he was in that job for a long time.
Very influential. You and I first also met in 1978 in a meeting that I was surprised by. I was chairing the campaign for district council elections.
Right.
At that time, the council was elected at large, citywide. Right. And we went to meet with the editorial board, and it was Rob Elder at the time, thinking there's no way the Mercury News is going to support this because we thought you were still the old Mercury. Yeah. So we meet with Rob, it's a cordial meeting. We go away and say, well, yeah, we'll see what happens. They call us up, we come to meet with you. So we talk with you about district elections. We go away and we think, well, that was interesting. And then we get a call, we need to meet with Tony Ritter. So we go meet with Tony Ritter about the newspaper's position on district elections. So we were surprised to actually get so much attention. In the end, the editorial said district elections was an idea whose time had not yet come. Yeah. So it was kind of a gentle rejection. Mm-hmm. But I know that some of the old powers in the city were annoyed at the Mercury for not more aggressively opposing district elections. What do you remember about
You know, it's
time?
interesting. You mentioned that in the note you sent me about this. I don't remember it very well. I should. My own inclination, I think even then, was that in an area of any diversity and size, that it makes more sense for district elections make more sense than at-large elections. I also know, however, that it's not unusual for newspapers to be reluctant to endorse that because it lessens their own roles a little bit.
it makes their job harder because you have more council members. And,
That's right.
yeah.
But it also it's easier to have influence when everybody is a part of the same pot than when you've got a Vietnamese area here and Mexican American area here and so forth. I don't that your recollection of that kind of surprises me, but I don't question it at all. I'm sure that we were struggling among ourselves on that because we were less than 100% together on it.
Yeah, well, we were surprised that we got even.
You got as far as you got?
Yeah, that's right.
How much later did it actually happen?
It was on the ballot then in 1978.
And it won?
And it won.
You won?
We won.
Oh.
And the first district council was elected in 1980.
So much for the editorial influence on
Yeah,
that
well,
issue.
fortunately, you kind of backed off, and it wasn't as aggressive as the old guard in the city would have liked. And they did actually what Phil Trounstein, as a reporter, referred to as the March on the Mercury, when they went to try to persuade Rob and Tony, I suppose, to oppose it. So you've been watching San Jose politics for a long time.
Yeah.
How do you think it's changed over the 40 plus years you've been an observer?
Well, it was in the, I think, the early stages of becoming modern when I came here. Norm Mineta had been the most recent mayor and apparently had sort of started a process of streamlining San Jose government. And Ted Tedesco, who was a forward-looking guy, was the city manager. Tom McHenry, I guess, actually went on the board or the council while I was here that first time. But he became mayor and rather dramatically led changes to the city after I went back to Miami for several years. And I think that it's a different city in a lot of ways.
Thank you very much, Larry Jinks. Thanks for hosting us. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for being here. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Terry.
For other interviews with the leaders and activists who shaped the history of San Jose and Santa Clara County, look for the Valley Politics History Interviews on YouTube. I'm Terry Christensen. Thanks for watching.